for joining us today for the webinar, AAOE Data Warehouse Logistics. Before we get started, I have a couple of housekeeping notes to review. First, participants have audio access only during the webinar. That means you're able to listen to the presenters, but you can't speak to them or to other attendees. And secondly, if you have any questions or comments, please type them in the chat box in the bottom right side of your screen so panelists can address them throughout the webinar. And now I'll turn it over to our facilitator for today's webinar, Cecilia Sepp.
Great. Thank you, Amanda, and welcome to our third and last chapter in the Data Warehouse webinar series. The Data Warehouse is going to launch in January of 2018. It's a really exciting time for AAOE and for healthcare in general as we're moving more toward data warehouses and usage. So we've been talking a lot about it this week. We've talked about some general concepts, value. Yesterday we got really into the technical meat of it. And it's a really fascinating concept, but today what we're going to talk about is the how-to of the data warehouse. How do you actually use it? So we want to close out today with that topic because we want all AAOE members who participate in the data warehouse to be comfortable with it and confident with how it works and how much it's going to help them. So I am your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm glad to be here today. We've been having a great time this week talking data. And our panelists today are Brian Bewley, a data consultant with Stratasy, AAOE President Ron Horshevsky, Board Member Jason McCormick, and Sam Sanchi, who's also an AAOE board member. And from the AAOE staff, we have Vicki Sprague with us, who is our data guru. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our third part of our webinar series today.
Thank you.
So before we get started on our discussion, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves. So let's start with Vicki today with a short introduction. Vicki?
Thank you. My name is Vicki Sprague. I am the Director of Data Solutions for AAOE, and my primary responsibilities are to manage the annual benchmarking survey that we do, and currently to manage the development of the data warehouse. So I'm excited to be here.
Great, thanks. Welcome, Vicki. And Brian, can you tell us a little bit about your company and your role in the creation of the data warehouse?
Sure. I'm the president of Stratasy. We're a boutique consulting company, software development company. We've been involved with AAOE in building their benchmarking portal, and we have the privilege of constructing the new data warehouse and doing all the nuts and bolts under the hood of what everybody will be seeing.
Great, thanks. Welcome to today's section. And we're going to go to Ron. Ron, if you could give us a brief introduction about yourself, if you could tell us your practice, where it's located, how many physicians you have, and how many staff.
Thanks, Cecilia. My name is Ron Horshevsky. I work at Agility Orthopedics in Stoneham, Massachusetts. We have 7 orthopedic surgeons and a couple of part-time physicians, and very excited to be part of the panel. I think this is one of the most exciting projects I've ever been involved with, so looking forward to it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's a great endorsement. And Jason, can you tell us about your practice?
Sure. My name's Jason McCormick. I am the manager of process improvement at Campbell Clinic Orthopedics in Germantown, Tennessee, a little suburb of Memphis. We are about a 51 physician practice. We have 5 locations and then 2 surgery centers. And agreed, I'm extremely excited to be involved in this, and back for day 3 of the webinars here.
Yes, Jason's been here every day with us, so thanks for taking so much time and sharing so much of your expertise. And Sam's here for his second time this week. So Sam, can you tell us a little bit about your practice?
Thanks, Cecilia. My name is Sam Sanchi, and I'm also on the board of directors like Jason and Ron. And I'm the practice administrator for a solo doctor practice, Dr. Diana Cruz. And we're in Sauk City, Wisconsin, about 20 miles from Madison. We have the doctor, a nurse, and a part-time X-ray tech, and that's our practice. So we represent the solo practice, the smallest solo practice. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks again for joining us. So today's topic, of course, is AAOE Data Warehouse Logistics. So we're going to get into how you actually use this. So we're going to throw our first question to Vicki. So Vicki, if a member's part of the annual benchmarking survey, do they need to do anything else to participate in the new data warehouse?
Yeah, we really need the separate sign-up process for the data warehouse because, as you know, benchmarking survey, you know, the members are able to participate, and if they participate, they get free access to the benchmarking results. And we're going to keep that format for the benchmarking survey. There is cost associated with developing and managing a data warehouse, so we are asking participants to sign up. So we need practices to submit a sign-up form identifying their intent to participate in the data warehouse, and then there's a participation agreement that is also required, and it is a per provider per year fee to participate in the data warehouse, again, to support the development of the infrastructure that we need for the data collection process.
So when the warehouse launches, Vicki, what sort of data might you be collecting?
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up on my screen here a couple documents. I just want to tell you a little bit about the data. There's three major types of data that is going to be collected in the data warehouse. The first is patient satisfaction surveys, and this is a great way to get started if you're a smaller practice and haven't collected satisfaction outcomes or quality data before. Starting with satisfaction is a great way to kind of experience this and know how you can compare your practice in other areas to industry orthopedic practices. So you can see here that we have, you know, CG CAPS, which is the CMS approved survey, is what we are selecting for the primary survey that we're going to use. We're going to have the ability to customize that, so if you're not ready for the entire CAPS survey, you can use certain items from that so that it's not the entire survey. If that's too much, there's something called a Net Promoter Score that you can include in surveys, whether you use a survey now or maybe you just want to get started and just add 2 questions. And those really are, would you be willing to refer this practice to a friend or family member, or would you be willing to refer this physician to a friend or family member? So 2 simple questions could get you started collecting patient satisfaction survey data, sharing it into the data warehouse, and be able to hear how you're doing to other orthopedic practices that are AAOE members. The second type of data that we're collecting is patient-reported outcomes, and we went through a review process with several AAOE members to give us feedback on which patient-reported outcome measures we should be using. And we really have a set of measures that can, again, meet where you are. There's some short versions and long versions of some of these measures that you can select from. If you're using the longer measure already, you could stick with it, but we're going to recommend that you start with the shorter versions of all these measures so that it can start very simply and collect this data very efficiently with your members. And obviously we have a lot of specialties out there in orthopedic practices, so the set of measures is intended to be relevant regardless of which specialties you have represented in your practice. And then the third component are quality measures, and this is a quick list, and again, I know this is a lot of information to look at on a webinar. It's probably not going to be up long enough for you to really digest, so we will make this information available on our website so that you can look at this a little more closely and really assess these measures. And this was all part of a review process that we had with several AAOE members to say, of all these available, here's some that seem most relevant to orthopedic practices, and which one should we start with in our data warehouse for 2018.
Great. Wow. And do you have a flow chart that shows how these measures will be going into the data warehouse?
Sure. So let's look at this in a couple different ways. So here, all these bubbles up here, you know, this is all the data out there that's flowing in. So this is it's a snapshot of those tables that I just showed you previously. So let me give you a closer look at some of this other information on here. So again, these are the measures. I'm going to scroll down here so you can see the flow of kind of how data goes into the data warehouse and then how it's going to be reported out. So there's a lot of different ways to get data in. So we start with the patient satisfaction and patient-reported outcomes. One of the ways that we could do it is if you don't have an existing process for collecting those measures, we can actually set up surveys in the data warehouse and collect a patient satisfaction or these patient-reported outcome measures. We'll send you a link to use with your patients, and that link will be customized to your practice so it looks like it's coming directly from your practice. The patients then complete the survey, and the data is fed all the way back to the data warehouse. So there will be no additional data collection, data entry that you would have to do at that point to have your data included in the data warehouse. So that's a very powerful that we're building, and this is kind of starting on this right side of the flowchart as one of the mechanisms to get the data in. And then for, if you're already collecting patient-reported outcomes, and maybe it's in your practice management system or your EMR or quality measures, a lot of that data for that is already going to be in your EMR. There's two ways that you can then get that data into the data warehouse. You can either use a data entry template or upload template that we will provide that will be part of the mapping and the data models built in the data warehouse. You can upload that data directly into the data warehouse. Another thing that we're working on is relationships with several EMR vendors, data analytics companies, practice management systems, so that we can create connections, direct connections from that system into the data warehouse. So you don't have to do anything additional, but give your approval for your data to be transferred into the data warehouse. So those are all the ways data can go into it.
Wow, that's a great overview, and that sounds like a valuable member benefit. That's great. And we see on the bottom of the screen all the anticipated outcomes from participation, so that's great. So the board is setting the example for participation. I believe the board is nearly at 100% if they haven't hit it already. So we're going to start off with the AAOE Chief Elected Officer, Ron, and ask him, what was the process like when you signed up for the warehouse? Did you find it easy to do?
I was actually surprised at how easy it was. It probably took me about 5 minutes. They just want to know your name, practice name, how many doctors you have in your practice, how many non-physician practitioners you have, some of your contact information. You basically indicate that you're agreeing to participate, and they give you additional information, and then you just have to enter a validation code that basically says that you're not a robot, you know, just kind of signing up. So it took 5 minutes to indicate the interest in doing it. And I understand, and I've read that further down the road there's going to be a participation agreement, which I read the entire thing, and it actually is quite informative. Sometimes when you get into legal documents, they can be a little bit cumbersome, and but this was quite informative, and it really helped me to understand the process in the involvement of the data warehouse.
So that's great. How many pages about is the participation agreement?
It's 22 pages, but it reads like 21.
Oh, good to know. So Jason, let's get your insight on the process. So what tips would you have for someone who's getting ready to sign up for the data warehouse?
Well, I mean, I think the only tip that I would have is just to do it. You know, whether or not you're on the fence about participating, you don't know whether you should or shouldn't, you don't know exactly what your practice's plans are for 2018 or anything else, I think you go ahead and you sign up. You know, it's always, I'd rather be signed up for something than find out, you know, on down the road that I should have been signed up. So I think that the number one thing is just go ahead and sign up. I mean, it's not whether you know, are a small practice that has an EHR and is used to reporting all this type of information or not used to reporting it, or whether you're a large practice that is extremely used to reporting it. It doesn't really matter. What matters is just that you're involved. So you can get in with really you're not locking into to reporting, you know, boatloads of data. You know, all that you're doing is locking in, saying that you're going to be participating. And it's not even, you know, like Vicki was explaining, there's several different places that you could begin. You could only do patient satisfaction, or maybe you only do patient-reported outcomes, or maybe you only do some quality. It doesn't really matter. You can take advantage of everything, or you can get in as small as you want. So, you know, the best advice that I have is don't wait too long. You know, especially with coming with MACRA and with MIPS in 2018, we're talking about a full calendar year. So, you know, the quicker that we can begin submitting data to that, you know, to the QCDR is the better. Then we're going to be able to say, well, we've at least been submitting data for the entire year. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a complete data, just period. We're submitting something.
So we're getting it in. So great. That's a great endorsement, and also a great lead-in to get Sam's input on this. So we've heard it's actually a pretty easy process. But Sam, you're from a small practice, which means you might have fewer resources and time and staff. to do these sorts of things. Did you find this burdensome at all to sign up?
No, like Ron and Jason said, it's really a couple of clicks to get in there and put some information about the details of the demographics of your practice. It took me a couple of minutes. The participation agreement, is very detailed. It shows what all the safeguards are for your data, and it's just a well put together document. When the participation agreement is filled out and returned, that will trigger the invoice for participation, and it's a very easy process that I see.
So you mentioned an invoice for participation. Did you find the fee reasonable as well?
It's very reasonable. I don't know anybody out there, any registry that would be able to provide the cost that we're providing.
And what is the fee for participation?
It's $100 per provider.
And is that, it sounds more than competitive with other groups?
Yeah, last year I used an outside registry just to avoid the penalty for this year, and I believe it was $250 for just one provider.
Wow,
so it's significantly less.
Significantly less, and that means because the specialties coming together to do this, there can be that cost savings. So that's great. So, Brian,
Exactly.
We've heard a lot about sign up and how easy it is, and it's actually very affordable. So what are some of the different ways that participants can get their data into the warehouse when it's set up and ready to go?
Well, I think Vicki touched on that a little bit earlier, but I'll kind of reiterate it, and maybe I can provide some more technical depth or something to it. But basically, there's multiple ways to get data into the system. If you're talking about like the patient satisfaction surveys and the patient outcomes measures, that will be coming in through the delivery of surveys. And I'm not sure that we have adequately explained the way this works, but once you're a member, we have made all of these these outcome measures, the HOOS, the COOS, the CAPS, the NETS promoter score. Those are all available in the system, and so you as a user, through the same portal that you go into right now to view benchmarking results, can go in and say, I want to send a survey, and select which survey you want to send. One of the best parts about it is, as Vicki alluded to, is that you can customize that survey. So if you don't want to send the full CAP survey, you can go in and customize it to your liking. And you can also construct your own surveys completely from scratch, make up your own questions that you want to do. And then those will be available only to your practice, but all that data will be coming into the data warehouse. So you can send out surveys. They'll be personalized, as Vicki alluded to. You can add your logo. We're also designing it so that it is very generic, so that we can generate an embed code, so you can put it into your own website. So it looks like people never left your site to take the surveys. For those of you who are familiar with another platform, I actually see a link right now on Vicki's screen to it, but I won't call it by name. We'll just call it the Survey Primate. But very, very similar to that, in our system, you're going to be able to construct your own surveys in addition to your own data entry forms. If you decide, hey, there's some data that I'd like to collect, or a group of practices or physicians get together and say, hey, we want to track these particular items, you can create your own data entry forms, create your own data maps, which is an exciting feature that not a lot of places have. You'll be able to say, okay, I want to have these fields in my data, and now I want to be able to send you a comma delimited file or an Excel file, and you can map it through the system and say this field goes here, this field goes there, and get your data in from external sources. And then also, as Vicki alluded to, we are working with EHR vendors to use our API that we're developing to have direct connection from EHRs, EMRs, whichever acronym you choose to use, so that there's really nothing you have to do other than use that system, which will directly connect to the data warehouse. So numerous ways that data come in, APIs, external files, and through user input through surveys.
So, and as you mentioned, Vicki did touch on a lot of these already, but could you give us a brief explanation of what API is and how it works, and then what another type of external data file could be?
Well, an API is an application programmer's interface. It's basically just a specification that says, here's how you talk to a system. So most of the EHRs have their own APIs. Our warehouse will have its own APIs. Sometimes APIs exchange XML, sometimes it's JSON. Yeah, there's various ways. Sometimes it's HL7. I mean, HL7 is a standard that many of you are probably familiar with as well, or EDI standards. Those in a way are APIs. They use APIs to get data back and forth and send the data. So that's any number of methods. You said any other methods. You can send in a comma delimited file. You can send in an Excel spreadsheet. We're working to basically try to make this as accommodating as possible. We're actually looking for actively recruiting practices that are out there that would like to help us with this process, because we want to make this as useful to members as possible. So if you want to say, hey, I'm using this system and it can generate this report or this kind of export, get with Vicki and help us with this. We'll take your files and we'll work with you and see if we can't automate as much as possible to get data from your systems.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. That's a great explanation. So, Vicki, we're going to throw it back to you for a few minutes. So Bryant's talked a lot about how you can get the data in a variety of different ways. So let's say you're with a medium or smaller practice and you want to do Excel. Do you still need to buy additional software in order to take that into the data warehouse?
No, I really don't think there's a need for that, because it's really meeting you where you are. So, some practices you might not be collecting this data at all, so you can just take the data entry templates that we give you and start capturing the data there. You could just directly enter your data into the templates. If you are using something, no matter what that is, there's probably a way to get it out of that system into these data entry templates and then upload it. And again, if you're using these smaller systems, if you send us an example of your report, maybe we can build it so that you can just take what you already have, upload it directly into the data warehouse. So no, there is no need to buy anything additional specifically to participate in the data warehouse. And then as we grow and expand, hopefully the vendors that you're looking at will have connections already established, and we'll have all these reports already mapped into the data warehouse. So if that's something you're ready for and you're going to do it for other purposes, then the opportunity is still there to adapt to meet those needs as well.
So at this point, what I'm hearing is that if you have data, you can get that data in the warehouse, and it's not just member participation, it's member creation, because members can help create not just the data, but how the data is handled with the surveys. So that's great. Okay, so let's get kind of some practical input. Jason, you're from a larger practice. How do you anticipate getting your data into the warehouse?
Well, good question, Cecilia. I think we actually, right now, if I had to say that we were planning on doing it a certain way, it'd probably be that we're going to be doing it in multiple ways. So we currently use a homegrown patient satisfaction survey. So, having a link or something on that feeds that information directly back into the data warehouse would probably be an option for us there. That would be a rather easy option. So we just, we do that, and then all of a sudden our patient satisfaction is taken care of. For some of the more specific quality information or outcomes information, that type of thing, we're probably going to be using one of, a report that comes through our EHR, or, working with our EHR to build that API so that the data is in real time and flows directly through. We won't get into exactly which of the EHRs we are contacting right now, but I'm involved in actively reaching out to those EHRs and beginning to have that conversation. So I know that there's several, a good 6, 7 or so that really support the majority of the AAOE membership, and so those are the guys that we want to have on board, and so that There's multiple ways that we'll probably participate right out of the box, but eventually, who knows? It could be that we stay that way, or it could be that it's streamlined. So there's lots of different opportunities there, even for a practice this large.
So you're obviously going to be a case study of all the different ways you can get the data in.
I'm always a case study.
Well, that's good to know because we need those. So. Well, Sam, let's get your take on this coming from the smaller practice side. You've mentioned before in previous conversations that you're not really using what you might describe as a sophisticated, robust EMR or EHR right now. So what's your plan for getting your data moved into the warehouse?
Well, actually, yeah, we are unique. We don't have an EMR that we're using yet. So initially what we're going to be doing is using the data templates and the surveys. Right now we're doing patient-reported outcomes and trying to get to the place where we want to start using the patient satisfaction survey. So we're going to be treading lightly in the beginning, which that's the best part about this and why it's such a great member benefit, that you can participate at any level. And we're building this thing for all of AAOE, and I imagine that sometime in the next couple of years, the plan seemed to be that we'd take our lumps in terms of the penalties for MIPS, and that MIPS seemed to be a bridge too far in terms of what we're wanted to do. But I envision us getting involved with an EMR at some point here in the next few years. And this will be a built-in thing for us. So the time for us is now to start getting into this practice of seeing what the value is that we provide. And so, I mean, it's very exciting for me. And I think that, all small practices should be thinking in terms of this because the need to produce data for CMS and our payers and the networks that we're a part of, it's not going to go away. It's just going to become an even greater requirement to participate. So, and to be dealing with a friendly company, a known quantity in Stratasy, and having Vicky, I mean, it's just a great setup for us to piggyback on larger practices like Jason, et cetera. So, I envision this to be a real good learning experience for me, and also to demonstrate to my doctor, and I'm telling you all this because she's in surgery right now and she can't hear any of this stuff that I'm saying. But no, it's a fantastic opportunity.
That's great. So there's a confidence and a solid infrastructure for the smaller practice, which is a great benefit as well. So, Ron.
Exactly.
Thank you, Sam. And Ron, so we've talked already about like all the different ways you can get the data in, how easy it is to sign up. We've just heard a lot of the benefits for practices. So when it comes to actually uploading data into the warehouse, Ron, what do you think is the most important thing or the one thing that a participant should know?
Well, I think that the most important thing that people need to know is that this whole system is being developed with the end user in mind. So I know Vicky and the staff and Brian's team have all worked really hard to make this not a burden to the administrator, but something that's going to be either uploadable in an easy fashion through something like an Excel file, or something that goes automatically from your EMR or your PM system directly into the data warehouse. So I think the most important thing is that this isn't necessarily going to add to your workload. It's going to really expand the breadth of knowledge that you have with the data that's available to you.
And that's a great segue to throw it back to Brian and get some more insight on accessing the data. So we've talked a lot about building surveys, and we need a lot of participants to get data into the system and then to build new surveys. But so let's say that there's data in there, there's some surveys and reports ready to go. So how easy to access this data? Is this data going to be mobile? Is it going to be responsive across devices? Are you going to be chained to your desk? How can you get the data once it's in there?
Well, it's basically accessible through the AAOE data portal, which is a new single repository that we launched with this year's benchmarking results. So that site is mobilely responsive, and you can do anything on your smartphone. So if you're sitting in the airport and you want to send out a new survey, feel free. It's completely responsive. Doesn't tie you down, doesn't limit your login, doesn't say, hey, you were logged in here on a different machine half an hour ago. We've tried to make it as simple as possible, but it's also secure as well. We talked in great deal yesterday about the security that we've gone through with the high trust certification to make sure the data is kept private and secure. You can use it mobily, but the back end of that data is still just as secure. Now, if you happen to leave your cell phone without a password on it and lose it in the airport, that's on you. But
that's another issue.
The data is completely accessible from any device.
That's great. So because like you and I had been talking about the other day when we were prepping, it's like the basic founding concept of the internet. Knowledge needs to be free to flow where it needs to be when people need it. That's also, some people consider that the definition of relevance, having what you need when you need it. So that makes this data warehouse relevant and valuable, no matter how subjectively you're looking at it. So Jason, we've talked already about patient satisfaction surveys and how those are one of the first things you can do and just participate in that. But what are some other activities within a practice that participating in the data warehouse could support?
Well, not to diminish any of the aspects, but real quick before I mention anything else, let's talk about the patient satisfaction surveys. And I love mentioning this because I really feel like this is such a value to the membership. We've looked at any organization that has been doing, CG-CAP scores or doing, having somebody outside do your patient satisfaction surveys. There is a huge chunk of money tied up in those surveys. Anybody that's been paying it, you're looking at, $200, $300, $400, $500 plus per provider per month sometimes, or per year. So there is just this astronomical fee that's tied to patient satisfaction surveys. So, one of the major benefits of us doing this, and one of the major things that, we really wanted to include in the data warehouse and really sort of as a membership benefit, is being able to offer that exact same thing for one low cost. And so, one of the reasons, one of the things that we've been asked during the webinar series is, why do you want to participate in this? Well, find me the orthopedic administrator that doesn't want to lower cost.
Right.
Well, that's just about all of us, probably all of us. And that right there is an easy breezy, snap your fingers and you're going to reduce your cost. So, that by itself is one of the reasons that you would want to get into it, to support your practice. And that you can move that into other areas, things like, patient-reported outcomes, so that you can improve your quality, but not only just that, you can use that to begin to build your case for when you go to contract with an outside insurer or an employer about why you should be the one delivering the care to those patients or their employees. We can always sit around and say, yeah, we deliver great care. I mean, I'm sure all of us as orthopedic administrators say our doctors deliver the best care, but we're looking for something that's going to put the proof there, and having your data in the warehouse and being able to pull that back out and use the benchmarking that'll be available is finally going to give you that leverage to be able to do that. So again, that's patient-reported outcomes. Now, of course, don't even get me started on the whole regulatory side of it.
Okay.
That is a whole piece that I feel like I spend most of my life dealing with, but this is going to make it a lot easier, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because there's so many aspects of what I do every day, that this is going to help me with. And the thing about it is, I'll go to Sam's point, and Sam is a group. Sam doesn't have, they don't have the resources that we have, and so one of the great things about membership, again, is it's for all of us of AAOE. So this is going to, use my back. As you can tell, it's kind of broad. Use my back, hop on, and let's go. I want to see this through, and I'm happy to take, other members with us, because this is important not only for us, but I think it's important for our patients.
Jason, you're an excellent advocate for this, and I think that's very well said, all those different aspects of it. So, Ron, we've already touched a little bit on the other things that you can get out of this for your practice. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what Jason just outlined, and then maybe if you have some other insights into how this can support the practice in other areas.
I'm sorry. I think Jason explained it really well. But if we look to the future and we think about the fact that our physicians are going to be compensated on quality, patient-reported outcomes, and patient satisfaction type things, like if reimbursement is going to be built around those types of things, then perhaps physician compensation should be built around similar models. And I know bigger hospital systems have the sophistication that they can do this. They can build compensation models that incorporate quality and outcomes and even patient satisfaction. Well, this will afford practices that are like my size, like Sam's size, the ability to build compensation models that represent the same model that the money flows into the practice. It can flow out of the practice in a similar means. That's the only thing I would add to what Jason had said.
So, great. Thank you, Ron. And I'm checking our time. We're having such a great time talking about how all this data is going to get used. We're already down to the last third of our hour, so I'm going to kind of move us along. Sam, could you share just very quickly how you think this is going to help your business processes as a smaller practice?
Well, yeah, just to build on what Jason said, I mean, right now we're not doing patient satisfaction surveys for the simple reason that it costs money to do them, and this is built into it. And what we'll be able to do with that and our patient-reported outcomes is demonstrate to the payers, like we're in a commercial bundle right now, and I don't know, about a month ago they asked me, how long does it take for you to get a patient in if they want a total knee replacement? And I can tell them what that is, but now I'll have the ability to show them what that is. And so it's a tremendous thing for us.
That's great. So this is going to be a huge business benefit and support then for the smaller practice. So we do have a couple other topics we want to cover, so I'm going to jump ahead. Vicki, could you outline for us what you see as the stages of development for the data? Because it's not all going to be right there right away on January 1. So how do you see it building over time?
Yeah, so obviously the first step is to get the data in, which is what we've been spending a lot of time talking about here, all the ways that we can get the data into the data warehouse. The next step of it really is developing the reports. What are you going to be able to see with the data? So this is an area that will evolve over time. We'll have an initial set of reports that we think are going to be relevant in each of the areas: satisfaction, outcomes, quality. We'll define some of those reports, and unlike the benchmarking survey, which is really practice level reporting, we have the opportunity to build both practice level and provider level reports. So you as a physician or you as a practitioner could log in and see how your individual data compares to other professionals in your specialty of the same type. So we'll build those reports early in 2018 after we have that initial data set and we really have the data on which we can build those reports. And then I expect that those reports will continue to evolve over the course of the year, from member input. Hey, this would be perfect, except I need this one additional report. Or could you modify this report to give me this piece of information? So, really, I think it's always a conversation with our members, with our board members, or with our volunteers, and all of AAOE AAOE members on what can we do to increase the value that you're seeing from that information, because it is all about having the right information at the right time in your practice to make effective decisions.
So, and a follow-up for you, Vicki, on that. If I want to participate, do I need a certain amount of data or a minimum amount of data? So, like, for example, do I need at least 50 records, or could I do 5 records?
No, I think you can start where you are. I would say the closer to 50 you get out of your patient population, the better, just because, if you're comparing your practice's performance to others, you need to have a good enough sample within your practice to really have meaningful results. If you're only sharing 1 or 2 patients, probably might not even want to look at that, because who knows how they are across your population. So you need to look at your size, and the more you get to your entire population of patients and services provided, that the more robust your data is going to be. So I would say you need to consider that when answering that question. But really, you start with 25%. 30, 40% of your sample if you can't do all of it. Some things like patient satisfaction, patient-reported outcomes, you don't have complete control over which patients are actually going to provide that data. Patient satisfaction is a huge one on that. You can't require patients to complete the survey. So, it's an ongoing process to encourage them to complete the survey so that we can do it. But, it's going to vary somewhat, so there's not a true number, but I would say the more that you can give, the more meaningful the reports are going to be when you look at it to compare your performance to the industry.
So you don't need to upload all your data at once. You can upload parts of it.
Yeah, and I think there'll be, upload opportunities throughout the year, so we'll continue to define that, and it might vary somewhat by measure type and by each measure, satisfaction surveys with the portal, the way it's defined, it might be an ongoing thing. As they're completed, they're being transferred. Outcome measures, it might be more, maybe you do an import quarterly, or monthly, it just depends on the size of your practice and how often you want your data updated in the data warehouse.
So that's, again, a decision you can make on your own per practice.
Yeah, we'll probably have minimum expectations of when we need the data in, because the more data we get in and the more timely it is, the better it's going to be for everyone involved in it. So we'll have minimum time frames defined, but beyond that, it'll really be up to you in terms of how often do you want your data refreshed and updated.
Okay, great. So, Brian, you've talked a lot about the security, especially yesterday's seminar on the data warehouse. You mentioned there's an AAOE data portal. How hard is that going to be to sign into once you sign up to be a participant? Is it easy? Is it just a username and password, or are there a lot of steps?
It's pretty simple. I mean, most practices already have access to it, I would assume. Vicki could answer what percentage of that it is, but there's not much to it other than providing your email address, and I think if your practice hasn't been part of the benchmarking survey in the past, Vicki may have to add something on the back end to tie you to a particular practice, but it's a very simple process. And once you have that ID, it's not like you have separate IDs for the surveys and separate IDs for the for the benchmarking survey and separate IDs for quality measure. It's a single source for all of this.
Oh, so, excellent. So if I sign up for both, I don't have to worry about remembering yet another password.
Right. It's all one place.
Because we want to, and the reason I'm asking these kind of questions is because, again, today we want to talk about logistics, like how do I actually use this thing once it launches, and so these are great. So Jason, you've been very involved in the development of this project. So are people going to be able to create their own fields, or can you only use the fields that are already there?
Well, I think over time, I think it's going to be, the ability is going to be there, the functionality will be there to custom create your own types of reports, whether that's you need something specific, maybe a specific outcome measure that you're doing yourself. The difference in between a CMS approved registry and what we would like to be, which is a QCDR. The difference in between those two is that a registry is really only collecting specific quality metrics and reporting those to CMS. A QCDR has the ability to report or to capture and report all kinds of different things, not even just the quality metrics. So, you know, having the ability and the functionality to create your own reports, create your own tools, your own input, you know, places to put in data so that you can pull it back out. You know, it's basically going to make it something that we can use on the fly, and we can use to create something a little bit different.
So, and speaking of creating something a little different, Ron, have you given any thought as to what sort of unique reports you might be creating for your practice?
Yeah, I think that right now my patient satisfaction survey data kind of sits on an island by itself. You know, I look at the data and I say, oh, I think we're doing pretty well. I share it with the doctors. I share it with the staff. But in the future, I'm going to be able to have that information and be able to compare it to a national average. And I think that's going to empower. It's going to empower me. It's going to empower my staff and the physician, so that I can, you know, we can all basically be challenged by the fact that, hey, you know something, we can do better. You know, we thought we were doing well, but we're not scoring as well as other practices. I anticipate that we'll be above the average, but you know, either way, it's either, you know, be proud that you're above or be challenged that you're below. And I think having that information is going to be really invaluable. And also, I think it positions administrators very well when they're negotiating with a hospital system to demonstrate their quality, when they're talking to insurance companies to demonstrate their quality. If they're working with large employers that are close by, that they want to have their employees directed to your practice, if you can demonstrate that quality, it's really important. And you know, I'm also looking forward to having the clinical benefits of this. You know, if there's a lot of administrative benefits, but to be able to empower our physicians and our physician assistants with clinical guidelines, basically clinical outcomes, quality metrics that can help direct care, and perhaps demonstrate the effectiveness of something like maybe a visco supplement, where if an insurance company decides not to reimburse for it, but we can, if we have information that says otherwise, then that strengthens our position and can really be important on the clinical side of our practice as well as the business side of it.
So that's another great outcome a practice can get from participating in this data warehouse, which is really important. So Sam, there is the practical aspect of actually getting the data in there. So from a smaller practice viewpoint, how much time do you think you're going to have to set aside to keep your data updated in the warehouse?
Well, again, we don't have, you know, it's going to be me doing it, so that adds something to the time right there. But no, I think it's the kind of thing where I don't look at it in that way. I look at it as not what it's going to take to do it. It's what I'm going to get out of it. And with the templates and the surveys, I'm getting more and more excited, especially after we talk today about the patient satisfaction surveys, so that I can show to my doctor what the value of this is. And so I don't anticipate it being, whatever the cost is going to, the benefit in terms of what it'll deliver for us is going to be fantastic, I think.
Wow, that's great. So we actually are coming up to the end of our hour already. So I have a quick question for Vicki. What sort of support can a data warehouse participant expect to receive after they sign up and start submitting?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of support. You know, I'm here full time to help guide and answer questions. And then when I'm not able to answer a question because there's a nuance in something that you're doing, you know, there's experts on the panel here today that I can definitely refer to. There's Data Analytics and Benchmarking Council that I can reach out to. And, you know, we can really use the members that are in our leadership to help answer some more specific questions. If it's, you know, really, here's a unique situation in my orthopedic practice that I might not have had in my, you know, in my experience yet, I can always rely on that member network. But, you know, the start point is here, and as we evolve and as we grow and there's additional reports, and there's always the ability to add additional staff for support of that process too. So it's all, we're going to really make sure we have staff available to meet the needs of the members as they join the data warehouse and encounter issues. And of course, Brian and his team at Stratasy have the ability to answer technical questions as they come up too. If there's anything with an import that doesn't quite work and we can't quite figure out where the issue is, Brian's team would be able to assist with that as well.
And that's a great launching point to my next question for you, Brian. Other than making sure your data is clean, is there any other preparation somebody would need to do with their data before uploading it to the data warehouse?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Other than it being in a the proper format for upload, there's not a lot to do with it. In some cases, like with the data going into the QCDR, you really don't want to touch your data because then it may throw up some red flags when it's submitted to CMS. Excuse me. Which also kind of ties back to something I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about how much data do you have to put in. I was hearing that and I'm thinking, yeah, they can do a survey, they can do 2 patient outcomes, but there are some areas when you get down into the actual the quality measures that get submitted to CMS through the QCDR, where you have to maintain a set percentage, and that's a specification from CMS that says you can't go pick and choose through your records which ones you want to submit as quality measures. So there are some restrictions around that. So in some cases, making sure the data is standardized for the format, if it's a CSV file, if it's an Excel file, that's something they can do to prep. But in other cases, you definitely would not want to be manipulating your data to create the outcome that you desire.
Right. Oh, no. Well, we're not encouraging that at all.
Right.
But so basically, if I have my data and my data's there and it's ready to go and is organized, I can just put it in there. I don't need to do anything special.
No.
And just dump it in Excel and it's on its way.
Well, you go to the portal and you log in and you say, I'm going to do a data import, and you tell what you're going to import, and then you select the proper template, and then you upload your file and import it.
Okay, so the steps are well outlined, so they're easy to access, and it's easy to follow and get it in there. So that's great. We have 5 minutes left. So this hour has gone by so quickly. It's been great. So just very quickly, Sam, what would you say to motivate somebody, a fellow member, to sign up for this warehouse?
Kind of what I said the other day in terms of the value. Get involved. I mean, the more of us that are involved, the greater amount of data and reliability for that data. It will give us the ability to tell a story in terms of advocacy to CMS and then to payers as well. So it's just like I've said, it's a phenomenal opportunity for the membership, and what a great membership benefit.
Great. And then Jason, what's your pitch for why somebody should sign up for the warehouse?
Well, I think that anybody should. One of the groups that I really hope that we target, and one of the things that I'd like to see coming out of this is, people that are not current members of AAOE. I'd like to see a lot of those people coming on board, because, this is a great opportunity, and for those people that are not members, they're not going to be able to participate in this. So, hopefully having that and making that available to them is going to, help put some new blood into our organization and make it larger, which goes exactly to Sam's point, that the more data, the better the benchmarking and the better being able to use that. I did before we stopped. I did want to make one more comment though, talking about help and about if people have questions or anything else. As of today, I did actually make a post onto Collaborate that is for benchmarking, for data warehouse questions and answers. So anybody that may have questions after hearing these different webinars, anything comes up, there's an opportunity for you to go there and just post that question out so that all of our membership can see that, and then also you can get the answers back. Everybody has the ability to give you those answers, whether that's Vicki or myself or Ron. Anybody can get on there and give you that. So take advantage of that. If you have questions of any kind, you know, no matter what it is, no matter it's extremely technical or non-technical or you know, a little question, a big question, whatever, put it in there, because you know we are doing this as a group. This is not you know, me wanting to do this one program so that it helps me and doesn't benefit anybody else. So take advantage of that. We're here for the membership.
And the conversation continues after the webinar series, so that's great. So you can go back and watch the webinar, go have the conversation. Ron, what's your closing thought? Why should someone participate? How is it important to the profession and to the organization?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that this is a very affordable service that's being offered to members, but it represents a major investment on the part of the AAOE. From a financial standpoint, the organization has done very well over a number of years, and we're able to reinvest a lot of our capital or a lot of our money and resources into a service like this. So as inexpensive as it is by no means cheap. You know, it's something that is being offered to the membership and with great benefit, but it does represent a huge investment. And I think that people need to understand that value is going to be passed on to each one of their practices and collectively to all of our practices when that data is combined.
And so that demonstrates the importance of this going forward for everybody. The organization's investing all of this time and money into this. So Vicki, you get the last question, which is how does somebody sign up now that they're all excited about the data warehouse?
Yeah, it's really easy. You can go to the AAOE website and go under the resources tab here, and there is a link to the AAOE's data warehouse where you'll find a lot of information, including recordings of the webinars that we've had this week. And at the end, it has, you know, form that you need to complete to get started. Just click the sign up now button. Most of that form is even populated for you as a member, and complete the rest of the information, and that really starts the process for you. So it's that easy.
That's great. I love self-populating forms online. They save so much time. That's great. And if you haven't seen the whiteboard video, I encourage you to watch that. It's wonderful, very educational, very quickly. So we have had a 3-part series talking about the data warehouse for AAOE. We talked about the value, the technical side of it, and now today the logistics. So it's important, it's valuable, it's easy to use, no matter how large or small your practice is. So AAOE's put in a lot of work on this. Everybody's excited about it, and it is one of those services that members can be proud of when they talk about their association. So it's a great thing. Check it out. Sign up, get your Excel charts ready, and watch for the QCDR to launch, I think sometime next year, right, Vicki?
Hopefully, pending approval from CMS. We have applied for it, so pending that approval, yes.
So once it's approved, that will be launching as well. And there's a lot of benefits to using that, as Brian has mentioned in our other webinar yesterday. So check that one out. I want to thank our panelists again, Vicki Sprague of AAOE, Ron Horshevsky, who is a member and Chief Elected Officer of AAOE, serving as President, board members Jason McCormick and Sam Sanchi. Thank you both for being with us this week, and Brian Bewley of Stratasy, who is the brains behind the build. So thank you all again for your time, and send your questions into the Collaborate group. Thank you, everyone. I'm Cecilia Sepp. Thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.